Good evening, everyone. Tonight is November 21st, 2022. It's 6:31 p.m. And I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for tonight. We will be using the hybrid technology, so we'll have roll call votes as usual. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you care to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Second order of business is our approval of the consent agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 4 through 7. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Are there any questions or discussion from anyone? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye. Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye. On to letter C, public open forum. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public open forum? I don't see anybody raise their hand. All right. Number 9, there's no planning commission report because it was a joint meeting last week. So we're on to number 10, which will be a public hearing on the Holiday Station Store, 9444 Lake Drive, for a 3.2% off-sale malt liquor license, and that's on pages 1 through 5 of our packet. The notice has been published, so at this time I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody here representing Holiday? Would you come on up, please, to the microphone and pull it real close? Give your name and address for the record.
My name is Gary Zoller. I'm a Regional Director of Operations for Holiday. I reside at 16019 Evans Avenue Northwest in Clearwater, Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and sit if you want. And you want to tell us what you're asking us for? It's all 3.2.
We are just looking for a 3.2 malt liquor license so we can bring in some 3.2 beer to cater to our customers and be competitive with our competition. It would be probably 1/2 to maybe 1 door of our walk-in cooler would be the selection at this time.
Yep. I'll ask our attorney at this time to fill in the blank spots for us.
Sure, Mr. Mayor and Council, as you know, the city recently issued a 3.2 malt liquor off-sale license to Love's. This is a very similar application. What's different about this application is, unlike other liquor stores where it has to be an exclusive liquor store, for 3.2 you can sell it from the store proper. So it's not an exclusive liquor store, it can be sold within the store. There is a little bit of an unusual requirement in that no staff under, it's on page 3 of the memo 4 of your packet. No person under the age of 18 years shall be employed in any rooms constituting the place in which 3.2 liquor is sold. Because that is overly prescriptive, with the last license, we said as long as the person behind the counter checking IDs is 18 or older, other staff within the building can be under 18. So wanted to provide that clarification as we did in the application for Love's. This is a technical cleanup that we'll need to fix in our ordinance, but we didn't want to be overly restrictive, particularly since it's very hard to get employees these days. So we want to make sure that the person behind the counter carding for that sale is 18 or older, but the rest of the staff within the building can be under 18. So that's one clarification. The other clarification is in our staff memo, our attorney memo on page 2, it indicates under 4 security and safe service requirements, the application does not provide a summary of the security and identification requirements to ensure the safe service of 3.2% alcohol. So we would just ask that the council make that a condition of approval, since it was not submitted with the application before there would be issuance of the license. We want to make sure that we understand how they're going to provide for that card checking. Oftentimes, employees are trained. Some people use TIPS training, others use different types of training, but the main thing we want to understand is that there is a training program required for your staff to teach them how to ID anybody who's trying to buy 3.2 alcohol. So that was something that we noted in the review that wasn't provided in the application. I think it can be addressed with a condition of approval if the council's comfortable with that. So those were two notes that we wanted to bring forward to you this evening.
Yeah, and we as an operator are very, we deal with the 18-year-old requirement to sell beer at a lot of our locations, where we have 16-year-olds working, so we're well versed in that. Nobody under 18 can complete that transaction. And we also have an extensive training program in place, not only for alcohol, but tobacco-related products as well. A lot of it's online training, but there's a lot of in-house materials that are required on a daily basis by the managers and by the store personnel to be signed off on. Any government failure is immediately met with termination. We do hire a company called BARS that comes out a minimum of twice a month to every one of our locations and does 25 and under as their shoppers. And they come in and they do age-restricted sales on tobacco and on alcoholic beverages as well. So we really, I feel, do a good job of policing ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, we'll close the public hearing with the right to reopen it if we find it necessary. And I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to say anything. And hearing none, shall we have some discussion? I think this is pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I just have two quick questions. One is, so they don't, I understand they don't have to buy the insurance because they didn't do off sale last year, so then is it the following year they have to? Okay. And then the last thing is, I did not understand the first sentence in 3A. So can you just, is that, it could just be legalese that I'm not getting, but I don't understand what it means. An order in it is what I don't understand.
Oh, probably in the business. We can strike an order in it.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't, I was thinking that, okay, I just don't get that. Thank you.
Anything else, anyone?
I don't have any questions.
No? Who wants to make the motion? And we have to add in the one condition.
Yes, if you'd like, Mr. Mayor, I can reread that condition for you.
Sure.
And that would be an additional condition number 5, applicants shall provide security and identification requirements to ensure safe and legal service of 3.2% malt liquor.
Right.
So this is, Janet, I'll make the motion. So I'll move to approve Holiday Station Store at 9444 Lake Drive, 3.2% off sale malt liquor license, subject to conditions 1 through 4, and the additional condition number 5, which is to provide a summary of the security and identification requirements to ensure the safe service of 3.2% alcohol, and a site plan dated 10/29/2018 in the attorney memo dated 11/21/2022.
It's Rob, I'll second.
So it's moved and seconded. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye. Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Well, thank you. So we'll move on to another public hearing, and this is for the certification of costs of a public nuisance abatement, 16658 Kettle River Boulevard. And this is on pages 6 through 12. And we'll again use the notice as was published.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just a quick reminder, this is the certification of the costs that the city incurred for putting in the fence on Iverson Street. The address is in the packet, and this is pursuant to our ordinances which allow and state statutes which allow the city to recover those costs by assessment to the property.
Thank you. Is there anyone here representing the property owner who would like to speak on this issue? Then hearing none, I'll close the public portion of the hearing, and I'll bring it back to the council. Does anyone have any questions or discussion on the issue? And what would be the resolution number? Anybody?
That would be 3131.
Thank you. So I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 2231, adopting the assessment roll for swimming pool abatement costs at 16658 West Iverson Street in the amount of $7,792.50. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Is there any more discussion or questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye. Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye. We'll move on to number 12, which is the presentation and discussion of the Forest Lake Cable Commission 2023 budget, pages 13 through 17. Hey.
Hello. I don't know how much presentation there is, but hello, Your Honor and City Council. I am Paul Peters from Lakes Area Television. I am just here to request approval of our 2023 budget to keep running our TV station. And I sent you a fairly detailed memo to go with the budget to kind of explain where we're at with things and where we're looking to go. I can expand on that if you want, or if you're good after reading it, that's cool too. I can go either way.
Anybody have questions?
This is Janet. I just have an interest question. You referenced the exciting new features that you are doing training for with the new broadcast system. Can you just let us know what those are?
Yep, so we had, our old actual broadcast system was about 8 years old, and it was starting to fail quite a bit, where the channel would just shut off. And the response I was getting from the companies that make it is, well, you're running an older system, you should probably buy a newer system. And I listened to that for long enough, and there's just only so much I can do. And it was running on a Windows 7 based system, and they're like, we don't support this anymore, so it was kind of a good luck thing. So we went a little bit over our budget on gear this year because it's about a once every 10-year upgrade we had to do. And the exciting stuff is so much of it is online now. So this comes with apps. So we have an Apple app being developed, a Roku app, an Amazon app, and a Midco app that everything we do will be on demand on any device you want to do. We have the ability to live stream from anywhere to any device. And we also have a new interface UI that I'm building for our website that is a simple line of code that would go into your website if you want. And then all of your meetings have their own web page. You can touch anywhere in the agenda on that page. It will jump right to that part of the meeting, and that is just everything going forward. And all of those are on demand. So it's a lot that will just kind of streamline everything for online and on-demand things going forward. That's the exciting new system.
Well, that sounds
I'm
exciting.
excited about it. I'm still learning how to run it, but
So Paul, this is Rob. So you're saying by the agenda topic, you can check on that and it'll pop right up?
yep. So yep, this meeting will have its own page and it will stream live if we want it. I don't know how much they're going to stream live because there's a programming. You have to actually program the end of the meeting too, which they can be 20 minutes, they can be 5 hours. So by the next day, you can watch it live on your Zoom. But for as far as we have all our meetings up the next day and we go put chapter markers in for all of your agenda items. So the actual agenda will be there. We can add the full packet if you want, and people can click anywhere in it. And we are putting chapter markers in that we can move around and switch at any time. They jump straight to any part of the meeting you want to see.
Very neat. Thank you.
Be really nice.
Any other
When will
questions?
that be available?
As soon as I learn how to work it all. But the apps
So that's like what,
themselves.
next week?
Yes, well, the apps themselves, they are developed by the company that builds our whole system, and I have submitted all the graphics and everything, so they have all my information. I am waiting on them now, it's in their court. And it was an extra purchase initially to do an Apple one. Each platform is a different purchase, so I did purchase an Apple one and an Amazon one and a Roku one. So they're developing, plus there's a Midco one, so they're developing 4 different interfaces for me for that. So I'm just kind of waiting on them.
Okay, great.
The website part of it, the goal is to have that by January, February next year to where all of the meetings have the UI that you guys can embed in your website if you want it. It will be on mine, and if you want the line of code, I just give it to you once, and everything gets their own page from that point on.
All right. I'll make the motion to approve the Forest Lake Cable Commission 2023 budget as presented. Is there a second?
This is Shelley, I'll second it.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye. Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Awesome, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Moving on to consultants report, engineer report, 2022 updates.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As far as any project updates, just West Freeway Drive continues to progress. Forest Lake Contracting is continuing to work and making progress. It's kind of interesting with the freezing temperatures. The freezing temps are both helpful and prohibitive. Interesting, they're trying to salvage some existing granular material that they would like to reuse, but it's frozen, so they have to haul it off and bring in unfrozen material, which they're doing at their own cost. So, but otherwise, freezing temps are good for some of the excavation work that we're doing. But so that continues to progress. Other than that, I have no other project updates. And the next item would be we brought forward the final version of the speed study for your approval. If you have any particular questions, I can address those if I can. And I think we've discussed it a couple times now. We do have that recommendation for some immediate changes to speed limits on some existing routes. So I guess it's a matter of whether you wish to move forward with those now. You could table those for later. I know at one point there was some discussion on whether we would sign all streets in town. That's not necessarily our recommendation at this point, but it's certainly something you could consider. And so I'll address any questions you have. Or
Which streets would you start with? Or what page is that on?
so on page 3, we have a table there of recommended speed limits, include Howard Drive, Howard Lake Drive, which is already signed at 35. There'd be Camp 3 Road, segment of Crossways Lake Drive, Notre Dame. I'm going down to the list at the bottom of the page. It'd be Camp 3 Road, Notre Dame, Lion Street, Furman, and DePaul. 170th, 172nd, and 181st. Those are the some of the routes in the Thornbeck Preserve area.
So I have a couple questions, Kevin. This is Janet. I know that, well, why wouldn't we just keep the entire stretch from Crossways all the way through to Lino at 30? I mean, we've talked about the fact that lots of people walk there. And I know there's the stretch that's currently signed at 30, and I think your recommendation was to take from Crossways Lake Drive to where it's signed at 30 and make that 30, so that you're not going, whatever it is, 45 to 30 to 45 again. Right. So I totally agree with that. But I'm just thinking that, that stretch sometimes gets used as a shortcut when things are backed up on the freeway. And people kind of fly through there. And not that, posting a speed limit of 30 is necessarily going to slow them down, but it might slow some people down, or at least it allows you to enforce it at 30. And there are a lot of people that walk that because that's the only place we have to walk. And so I'm just curious whether or not keeping the whole stretch 30 might not be a better idea.
Yeah, the policy would allow you to do that because it's in that range, of
Yeah.
that recommended range, so.
I don't know, Shelley, you live on that street. What do you think about that?
I would be all right with like bringing it down to like 40 and people would be going 45. I don't like the idea that you're putting it at 45 and they're going to go 50. One of the problems we have is that Lino Lakes controls East Ronda Lake Road, which comes in there, and it's 45 miles per hour. And that encourages these people, like I said, to go, as she said, that come around and take it as a shortcut. So at least I'd like to return it to, or have it at 40 rather than 45. And, I don't know about how the people are going to feel about bringing it down to 30, but I happen to be one of those people that's walking on there. So I don't want to do undue influence on it. All I'm saying is that 45 is a little fast for that area. And I also, when it was brought up the last time, I did mention the fact about the deer, and I had two dead deer in my ditch, so it does happen.
Yeah,
think
there are a
anybody
lot of deer
reported
that
it.
cross right by your house. I mean, I see them crossing all the time when I go down that stretch. And also a lot of turkeys, like big flocks of turkeys.
Absolutely.
So I personally I think just keeping it at 30 the whole way makes sense to me. Even 45, I mean, if you're walking and somebody blasts past you at 45, it feels really fast. There's not really a lot of place for you to go, other than diving in the ditch with a dead deer.
Yeah, 30 miles an hour can feel really fast if they're,
Yeah.
if you're close enough to traffic.
Yep. And then my other question was on 181st. So I happen to door knock during that area, so I feel somewhat familiar with that. Is it just because I'm having a hard time figuring out how you're distinguishing between the 30-mile-an-hour local residential and the 45-mile-an-hour local residential?
Yeah, and it's almost a case-by-case basis where you almost have to drive the route and see what speed you're comfortable driving it at.
Yeah, I mean, it's
this
pretty
would-
straight, but.
Right, yeah, and this would allow you to make certain decisions based on the policy and based on certain comfort levels of driving the route, so.
So I have a question, and I guess it's more about the whole report, because is our goal tonight just to kind of review the report and say we agree with kind of the methodology and not
Correct.
necessarily each road, what the speed
That's
limit's going to
correct.
be?
This establishes a policy, and the way we've handled speed limit issues in the 2 years that I've been here, it's almost 3 years now, is we've kind of taken them on a case-by-case basis. A lot of this was an outgrowth of Furman Street when that developmental for Thornbeck, first, second, and third has occurred. Concerns about speed on Furman Street, and so that was kind of an initial issue that was brought to me, and it was like my recommendation that let's not just look at one street, let's kind of establish a policy for the whole city that we can go by, along with some state law changes that came into play during this time as well. And so, so the issue is here, establish a policy. We have certain recommendations, and others can be handled on a case-by-case basis, either per request or, council recommendation, so.
Yeah, I was wondering if, and these are all guidelines, and I thought they were really clear on when the guideline changes from 30 to 45 or whatever. But like we had talked about at the last meeting, there's a lot of other factors that go into it that we might not know unless we drive it.
Right.
And which on your street, a lot of people walk. So to address all of the different scenarios here and going forward, is it the intent to do like a public hearing or neighborhood meeting or something where people have input? Or are we going to take them case by case and then try to look at what the other circumstances are and then vote on each one?
You know, I think if you get requests in for concerns, and you're looking at a speed limit change, we don't detail that in the policy, but I think that it's probably a good matter of public practice to take public input before you make, you know, such decisions, particularly if it's a, you know, either a downgrade in speed or, you know, or vice versa, which is unlikely, but, so.
Okay.
So I have one last question. So on Camp 3, where it says Collector 45, is that the stretch between Kettle River and Lake Drive?
Correct.
Can you even get up to 45 in that short little distance?
I think it's actually all the way to Potomac is the collector route.
Yeah, that's a
Oh, it
portion
is.
from Potomac all the way to Lake Drive.
Yep. That's defined as a collector in the MnDOT system. So.
So then what's the local residential section? There's 3 different sections listed there. Both of them, both collector and local residential is 45.
The 30-mile-an-hour portion?
No, the 30 is the gravel.
Yeah.
So that totally makes sense. I mean, I think all of our gravels should be 30 miles an hour, but I was just trying to understand the difference between the collector and the local residential bituminous.
Where are you looking at, Janet?
I'm looking on page 3, underneath the City of Columbus roads recommended for immediate speed change, and it's under Camp 3. So when I think about it, I think, you know, that little stretch in between, the one that will ultimately end up making a cul-de-sac, 45 seems like you're just asking for someone to try to
Yeah,
blast.
actually, that should be, under Camp 3 Road, it should be the collector and then the local undeveloped gravel, because that whole stretch is a collector from Lake Drive to Potomac.
So this is Rob on that, is there something in the study that says we have to leave that at 45, or is that, I mean, it's saying right here, the recommendation could be between 30 and 45, is that correct? To be set by the council possibly?
Correct, yes.
So, and I'm a little confused about the process too. So, I mean, that actually might help a little bit with the problem of people going through the stop sign. But, and I get that we're agreeing to the methodology and the study recommendations. But then these are the ones that you said are recommended for immediate change. So what's the process for actually making these changes? Is it adopting this study, or is it having a neighborhood meeting and adopting the study? What are we, or do we need to talk about that more?
I think you would need a resolution to actually change. I mean, these are recommendations, but you're not necessarily adopting the recommendations without a resolution indicating that you are changing the speed limits. So.
So is that a subsequent meeting, Elizabeth?
It would be a subsequent meeting that we would do that.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful, because I think some of these you might, just as you said, might deserve a little bit more thought.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you asking, though, for Kevin to bring back a recommendation and a resolution? Because
No, I'm saying, I'm seeing the recommendation here, so he has a recommendation. I think, though, as you know, whether or not we ask for more public input, or whether we say, no, well, we know there's a lot of people that walk there, or we know that maybe for Camp 3, because of that crazy intersection, maybe we want to keep it at 30. I'm just asking then how, you know, we can obviously change within the guidelines that we're being asked, and so 30 would be within those guidelines, but how do we actually do that?
So Kevin, would it be your suggestion that we take that up at a workshop? Or, I mean, because I'm not sure exactly how that conversation would go.
In terms of adopting these speed limit changes?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a subject for a workshop, and go into a little more detail on these recommendations, and then bring whatever recommendations forward through a resolution process to the council. So,
Okay.
But do we want to accept the study tonight, correct?
Yeah.
So we won't direct the Public Works Director to post
signs up.
until we do the next step?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody good at that? Just accept the study and then workshop it with the details. And then it would go back to the council, come back to us to have a resolution.
correct, and you may at the workshop decide that whether you want an additional public process to take public input, so.
Okay. Well, then I'll make the motion to accept the Columbus Speed Study. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you. Attorney's report, number 14.
Mr. Mayor and Council, in your materials is a memo from our office, Megan Rogers, regarding the commercial industrial district planning study. I'm not going to go through the entire memo. You were, I believe, all at the joint meeting with the Planning Commission. Attached to that memo is a proposed ordinance. Obviously, the goal of any discussion is to get to the point where you feel comfortable publishing the ordinance for public hearing. That may be tonight, that may be at a later night, but we need to kind of talk through the ordinance and some key policy direction before we can get to a ordinance that is ready for publication. As I understand it, the issues that are still kind of pending, if you will, are exactly kind of where that line falls between commercial industrial and commercial industrial light. Also, the amount of material storage has been a discussion, and that's outdoor storage, and then the application of the district. There may be other things that are on your mind, the definitions of contractors' yards and other definitions within the new districts. So at this point, we would take your input. I would also note, since there are additions, there are comments from an attorney for the Waldock family with regard to the application of the CI district, strongly opposing application of that CI light on the east side of Lake Drive, which would cover some of their existing businesses. Also noting that the current business is under a conditional use permit and could continue to operate under that conditional use permit in any case. We would agree with that. And then also from Waldock Crafts, from the Waldock family, is a second letter similar to their attorney's letter opposing a reduction in outdoor storage from 50% coverage to 30% coverage. I believe that's on the west side, so in the CI Light district. And then again, opposing the expansion of CI Light to the east side of Lake Drive. So I just wanted you to be aware of those comments in case you haven't had a chance to go through those since they were handed out as additions. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, it's really up to you how much discussion you want to entertain tonight, whether you want to try and work your way through the proposed ordinances to get to a place where you can publish it for public hearing, or if you think that's going to take additional meetings.
So this is Janet. I had emailed Megan last week with an idea that she said was a viable idea, but it's not in our materials, so is now the right time to bring it up?
Certainly. Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, go ahead. I have the copy of the memo, and
Okay. So I also am uncomfortable with the idea of having the CI light on the east side. I like the idea of having the light on the west side where it's, truly a transitional zone to the residential zone behind it. And I really I wanted to avoid creating any sort of nonconformities, and we would do that. And the idea of having the CI light on the east side was to limit additional heavy use, uses or businesses on that side. So I asked Megan whether or not we could introduce a performance standard similar to what we did in the light industrial area over in the Freeway District, which essentially limits any additional particular use within a certain diameter from an existing use. So in the case over there, it was no more asphalt, concrete production facilities within 2 miles of the existing one. And that way, you're not creating any nonconformities, but you're limiting any new businesses from establishing within that area. And so she had just emailed me back sort of what a draft performance standard might look like. And I think the question would be, what would be the size of the diameter that you would impose? And that was the reason I did the map, so that you could kind of look at that and figure out, what would make sense in that area. So that's one thing to consider, I think, to address the concerns of the Waldocs and Rybex, but still sort of maintain what the goal was in terms of trying to have less intense uses on the west side and not create nonconformities on the east side.
Mr. Mayor and Council, that's correct. I know that Megan Rogers drafted some proposed performance standards. We wanted to have this discussion to get the council's direction on whether to implement those. I can walk through them if you like. I know you don't have that in front of you. It was the spacing requirement. She drafted it as a 1/4 mile. It could be more extensive than that. With a 1/4 mile, there's a couple of opportunities for new contractors' yards. At probably a 2 mile spacing, it essentially eliminates, I believe it eliminates a new contractor's yard, and that may be the intent. In addition, there would be controls for dust and particulate matter. There would be controls for screening, and there would be controls for how close the yards could be to public streets and adjacent properties. So those were some of the ideas. They're similar to other performance standards that you have in the code, and the idea is to make it clear, what would go along with those performance standards. So one of the questions is, how far do you want to create that spacing? A 1/4 mile, a mile, 2 miles, I think that's a consideration. I believe, and I would look to others who've been a little closer to this discussion than I have, I believe at a 2 mile spacing, you would eliminate new uses of a similar nature. So as Councilmember Hegland said, the existing uses would be legal because they would be listed as legal, but it would essentially knock out any site that would be new. So I think the difference in Megan Rogers' approach was to essentially create a couple new opportunities on that east side, but not make it wide open. So I think that's the point of discussion that should go on this evening, so we can have direction whether you want us to incorporate those standards into a later draft.
And I think when you look at the map, the thing to consider is the non-conforming residential property that is on either side of Lake Drive. Those are fairly small lots, but if somebody were to go and purchase, a row of them, you'd have something big enough to put in a sizable. So I think when you look at where North Pine Aggregate is or whatever, and you think about where all those clusters of residential properties are, if you truly wanted to limit additional businesses like that, then I think you'd have to go wider than the 1/4 mile that she suggested. The other question I had was whether or not, part of what I struggled with was we have, I think, some really nice definitions, but then I look at the map and I think, well, where does like a Zukowski Trucking fit in? Like, what category does that fit in? Or, if somebody wanted to come in with a business similar to that all-season rental down in Lino Lakes, where would that fit in? Do we have a definition for something like that? Which that would actually be a nice business to have along Lake Drive. So I don't know if that's something, Elizabeth, or you can help us kind of figure out, but, you know, the contractor yard, I get, the manufacturing, I get, but there were a few businesses that we have existing where I wasn't sure where they fit in to our new definitions or even our prior definitions.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if something is not clearly listed, because we have the catch-all which says if it's not listed, it's not allowed. So if something like Sikowski Trucking isn't provided for, then it would be prohibited. However, we have an expansion clause which allows for the council to consider a conditional use permit or a PUD for a non-conforming use to allow for a modest expansion of that use. So notwithstanding the fact that it's not listed, the council has discretion to say, okay, this expansion is appropriate and you can expand it under this CUP process. If, on the other hand, you want to clearly call it out as legally allowed, then we would need to make sure that it's in one of the existing definitions or come up with a new definition for that use.
And then the last question I had is, if we stuck with the expansion of non-conforming uses, when I read that, I mean, the residences there are non-conforming, and I don't see anything calling this out as to be specific to non-residential property. So it seems to me that this would allow expansion of residential buildings or uses as well, which I don't think we want to encourage in our CI district. So if that's the way we're going, we might need to put something in there that it applies to non-residential expansion only.
Mr. Mayor and Council, that is correct. It's drafted broadly as noted. So if you only wanted to apply to, non-residential uses, we would need to clarify that.
This is Shelley. I have a comment about creating an area where we would not be able to put businesses of like, and Megan's information said something about contractor yards. My problem is that in the past, we've been fooled by people coming in and calling certain businesses things that they are not, and they are undesirable businesses from other communities. I feel like we've been targeted several times. I think that the people that come in that are realtors and that are developers, they do not necessarily have Columbus in their heart. And what worries me is if we have this, if we go with the way Janet has talked, that someone will come in and it won't be a contractor yard, but it'll be something that we really didn't want. Similar to the asphalt company and the Semstone, which were businesses that came in and a lot of the people here in Columbus did not want to see. So I don't know how to get around that because we keep being told we make ordinances or we make rules and then, something comes down the pike and, gee, we didn't think about that. And that's where I see a hole in Janet's solution. And I don't know how to get around that. Can you think of anything other than large contractor yards that we would not want along there that we haven't taken care of in the new ordinance?
Mr. Mayor and Council, that's why I think the definitions are so important, because again, within about 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 years ago, we amended the ordinance to specifically prohibit those things that are not listed. So they have to be listed and they have to be defined. And that's, if you can find a hole, help us plug it, but that's really that's the methodology we're using after that amendment, which prohibits anything that's not listed. So if it's not listed and it's not defined, they don't get to come in. And that provides really good direction at the counter, because we can have a staff meeting or we can meet somebody at the counter and say, you're not listed, you're not allowed. And you have to go through this process in order to demonstrate that. So I feel like this headed in that direction. If you see, as a council member, if you see something that is, as Councilmember Haglund said, Sakowski Trucking is not specifically listed. So it would be, not by name, of course, but by use, it would be considered non-conforming. It could expand under a conditional use permit. If you, as a council, believe that it should be allowed legally, then give us that direction. We will draft a definition that encompasses that use. Then what you understand is by doing that, you specifically say that use is allowed on other parcels. So if now you want to see a continuation of that use, we're going to put it in as a listed use and we're going to define it. But the type of thing that you've described shouldn't happen, now I say shouldn't because nothing's perfect, but shouldn't happen if we're doing a good job of specifically listing the uses we want, everything else is prohibited, and coming up with a good definition for those uses. So that's the game plan. Now, whether we can do it perfectly, that's another question.
So if we want to try to avoid creating nonconformities, we would have to list it as a conditional use, but potentially put the performance standard that would then say no more. So then that way, they could continue to operate, they could sell, they don't have the restrictions and things that happen when you're non-conforming, but we wouldn't be getting any more of them.
That's correct. Another way to do that is, uses that existed on the date of the ordinance. That gets a little tricky as the ordinance gets amended, then it's like, which provision were we talking about, right? So it is perhaps better to either A, allow them to expand as a non-conforming use, so they're clearly non-conforming, but they can expand under the provision that's drafted, or B, list them but have it be only so many sites by proximity definition.
And by having the ability to expand, does that take into account the potential challenge with financing should they sell? Or is that still, just by labeling them non-conforming, does that still put them in a position where financing might be problematic for the buyer?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I have found, doing the type of zoning analysis that lenders and out-of-town buyers look for, anytime you label something non-conforming, it makes it more difficult for them to continue that business. So that's just my experience. So if you're trying to allow for that legal conforming classification, then you need to come up with performance standards that limit the number of sites that can be considered. So that gets to be a little trickier. We have something in Minnesota called the uniformity clause in the zoning enabling statute, and it says the regulations must be uniform for each property within the district. And so you got to be careful when you create too narrow a prescription in the performance standards. That's why I'm a little concerned about the 2-mile radius, because it does appear then that you're trying to zone out essentially all similar uses on vacant property or property that could be redeveloped. So we have to look at that. That's I believe, behind Megan's spacing suggestion of a 1/4 mile, because it leaves at least a couple of opportunities for a similar use. So if you truly don't want something, then we shouldn't list it. And that's why the provision's been drafted to allow for expansion of non-conforming uses. So it's a bit of a exercise of threading the needle, because what I'm hearing from the council is you want to legal uses to continue to be legal, but then you don't want a lot of new opportunities for similar uses. And the struggle there is, from a policy decision, is how much is too much? When is the bag too full of one kind of use or another? So it's not an easy exercise, because you've got uses that have existed for 30 or 40 years and have done a nice job.
I have, just from a zoning administrator perspective, when I look at the trucking, the trucking facility, and I'm not going to use names, but just the uses, what do? They take flatbeds, they leave, they do their their business, and they come back with their flatbeds, they park them, and they repair them. So to me, it's a truck terminal, and they do repair. So I'm looking at the list, and I'm like, where does that belong? And then I'm looking at mobile mini. What is that? It's a storage yard that you put Conex boxes in. What is that? What, on this list, what would you call that? And I'm having a little trouble saying, okay, so if we're not calling it building contractor trades, then what is it? Because I know someone coming in and asking me that, I'd be looking at the list, I wouldn't, now I'm not sure what I would name things. Or what, you know, because their uses, what do? They store stuff. And they don't, the goods are not there, it's just the boxes that are there. So, just looking for direction, because I know I'm trying to look at uses on this and then still trying to trace them back to here. But even with light, would you say mobile mini fits? They take, you know, trucks come in, they drop them down, they bring them back and forth, they stack them. And that's how
Probably,
that's how
probably
they
not at 30%, right? Because if their main use is storage, right?
So we go back to like equipment storage or equipment transport when they came through, right? Like I felt like we're all in favor of that, right? Or kind of a repair shop. And then storage, I mean, is that, we're getting away from that at this point on that side of the freeway or on that side of Lake Drive? Is that what the intent of most of council is at this point?
I think, you know, with that business, for me, you know, when I heard it at first, it's like, I'm not so sure about this, but the way they described their business and how they plan to operate and how the fact that many of the trucks are not even brought back there, they're left on site, they come back and they get stored over the winter. I mean, it felt, and I think that's where most of us said, well, it sounds like it's gonna fit. I mean, and this was just a concept review, so you'd have to dig deeper. So I think that's, you know, that's where I go with not wanting permitted uses, is because I think by having that conversation with business owners, you can really learn a lot about how they intend to operate. And then you might have a level of comfort that you wouldn't have just by seeing the application come through. Or actually, it wouldn't even be an application, by just having them come and, yeah. So, but Elizabeth, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I looked at this, you know, once I did the exercise of naming all the, and it's like, how do they, I wasn't sure how they fit in either, but I thought I was just uninformed.
I'll tell you what my process is. Maybe that will help. So someone comes to the counter and they say, I have an X business. Do you know what I mean? And this is what I do. And then I say, well, what are you going to do on the property? Because a lot of times people tell me what they're going to do, but that's not what they're going to do on the property. You know, they're going to do something very different, because really what they do is someplace else. You know what I mean? Well, but what use are they going to do on the property? And then we look at the list and we say, okay, where do you think you fit in? And this is where I'm getting a little bit hung up on, because when I do, you know, review or public notices or do any of that, I'm looking at the code saying, okay, where do they fit? Under what A through M or whatever Z now, where does this business fit? What are we calling it? So it's not arbitrary, because if they tell me they're a lumber yard and sales, and it says lumber yard, that's really straightforward. But here it's saying contractor shop with accessory contractor yard limited. Is that mobile mini?
No, I don't think it is. But not by the way we've defined that. I mean, you could expand the definition, but I don't think, I mean, they're not, let's see, they're not providing service for construction, maintenance, cleaning, or repair of buildings, building components, and properties. There's storage, right? And I don't see storage in that definition. Could add storage, then it would it would fit, but I get, in terms of the nuisance factor, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, the nuisances created would be similar.
So what else, Elizabeth, makes it easier for you or more
I'm just,
definitive?
I'm trying to get a feel for what, you know what I mean, where we're going, you know what I mean, as far as, this is, because usually what Frank and I would do is, these conversations are what we use, you know what I mean, because how did you establish this policy? What was your definition? And the way the conversations go, we know how to apply it then. Because we kind of get your feedback and we say, okay, another Conex box comes in and we say, oh, no, that's, you know what I mean, that's storage, that doesn't fit. You know what I mean? Because we've had this conversation and you said, no, that doesn't fit in the ordinance. Now, if you put storage in there, I'll be like, oh, yeah, you fit because, you know, that's under that umbrella. Because people will say, well, you already have one, so you must allow them. You know what I mean? And so the other thing is, so now you have mini storage and you say warehousing and storage facilities. So is a Conex box a storage facility? No. But it says warehousing, so I mean, I know what warehousing is. And we have a few of those, so, you know what I mean, the garage condos, the evergreen storage, you know, I can't think of the other two, but again, so it's right there, it says warehousing and storage facilities, so to me, all of those are under that umbrella.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, when other cities have sought to continue to allow certain businesses but mitigate some of their impacts, they provide that some of those storage components can be within buildings, and that's warehousing. Or they'll have certain portions of the building business that are inside, and then they allow the accessory storage outside. So that's where you're headed, but we need your direction on kind of what's in and out of the allowed list, whether it's conditional or permitted. We need to start with what is allowed in your mind. And so when you run down, you know, Lake Drive and you think about, you know, what you want more of, you know, you tell us that. And when you think about what you want less of, again, not identifying any particular user, but what is that use? I believe I've heard that you don't want truck terminals, right? I mean, I think I've heard that in the discussion over several months. So how do we then describe something that looks like a truck terminal, but maybe is, you know, can continue in some fashion? Those are the hard calls, right? Because somebody's already doing it. Are you going to draw the line and say, not any longer? I think personally, I think the ordinance works better if you just get comfortable with there's certain things that are going to be non-conforming, that you can allow them to expand by conditional use permit, which is more than a lot of places do. But they're clearly then not going to be opportunities for vacant property. And whether that's a truck terminal or outdoor storage of Conex boxes, you got to make that call, right? But once you do, we want to put it in the code so that Elizabeth doesn't have to bring it back to you and say, what did you intend? It should be, so you pick up the page, you know, a person of average intelligence can read it and understand, oh, I'm not allowed here, or I am allowed here. That's really the goal line, so that there aren't these interpretive calls at the counter or even in front of the council. So I think one of the ones you want to wrestle with is truck terminals. Do you want them? If you don't, then we'll draft the ordinance in such a way that that's not a listed or defined use. And then the one or two that might be existing, we can work with them on, you know, how they can be expanded under our conditional use permit process.
Bill, what are you considering, like a truck terminal?
Well, I think of a truck terminal, you know, I start with, in my mind, a really large facility, but it doesn't have to be a large facility. And that's usually where, you know, big trucks come in, they unload product and materials into warehouses, and smaller vehicles come and dispatch them around the Twin Cities. That's often an example of a truck terminal.
Like an Amazon or a
Right.
FedEx or UPS?
There's a ton of them in Shakopee, for instance. That's become a huge place for truck terminals. But that could fit a smaller situation as well, where you have, the idea of the terminal is that somebody's coming in to do something within that terminal. It's not just storage of trailers and the like. That's storage of trailers. That's outdoor storage. And we've had to, in different cities, work with those uses and how many trailers can be stored and how is it screened and how often are people coming and going. But that's storage. That's a storage facility of some sort. And then you go, on the full continuum down to mini storage and other forms of storage. So, and these are, you're wrestling with the exact same uses that many communities wrestle with over, major changes to their zoning code. How much of it are they going to continue to allow to exist and under what circumstances?
So then you're saying that that's more of a contractor shop because they basically just drop the trucks. I mean, they just drop the trucks they don't do distribution, they just drop the trucks. It's just a terminal.
Yeah, to me, that fits within your contractor's yard definition, or it could fit, maybe with some tweaking, because there you're bringing in, equipment, even if it's a trailer, and you might do some minor repair, whatever, grease the axles or whatever needs to be done, but it's not like a truck terminal where you're bringing in freight and you're offloading it for distribution.
So I think, in our definition of a contractor shop, it seems that we're sort of limiting it to construction related. And I think, the two that I can think of, they really, I don't know, I don't know what they haul when they leave, but they're not hauling stuff back and they're not hauling stuff from their site. So I'm not sure that it would fit within the current definition of contractor shop, because I think we sort of limited that to construction related businesses. And I know we did that purposely. We weren't thinking about, the trucking side of it. I think, when we started this process, I think that we had some broad goals. One was to create a less impactful zone in the commercial industrial that abuts the residential zone on the west side. And at least for me, I didn't want to create nonconformities if we could avoid it. And then I think third is, boy, if there's one thing that residents have told us over and over again, not just people who live on Lake Drive, but all over, it's like, stop putting in businesses that have so much truck traffic. We're tired of trucks roaring through our community. And so, if you take those three things and say, if we're going to be responsive to the community, those would be the three things, the three goals I'd be trying to hit.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, that was one of our internal discussions when we started drafting this ordinance. It seems like the direction we're getting is to not allow for truck terminals and trucking facilities and places where a lot of trucks are going to be parked and going in and out. And so if you find those things absent from the definition of contractor shop, contractor yard limited, contractor yard, I believe that's by design. I believe that's where, the drafters and the planning commission and the joint meeting, that's by design. So then we come back to, you have to be able to get comfortable with, if that is the design and the intent, you have to be able to get comfortable with the idea that some folks are going to be non-conforming. But we've gone a step further as a community, at least in this draft, to say you can expand under certain circumstances, and that's an opportunity.
Because the other thing that's not here is trailer repair. You have repair of vehicle service and repair, machinery and equipment repair. And I don't know if you put trailers under machinery and equipment, but when I think of machinery, I don't think of trailers.
You don't have like a rental facility, like the one that I'm not on any page because it's not there. I mean, I do think that that's a business that we could consider. You know, like the all-season rental, it's on Lake Drive right before you get across Main Street. It's on, they just expanded within the last couple of years, but they have, you know, they cater to contractors, but they also cater to resident, you know, just anybody. I've rented stuff from them multiple times. I rented a man lift to paint my house, and they have everything from, you know, hedge clippers to man lifts.
Which would be similar to what we just gave out a conditional use permit, which is the signs. They rent signs and they rent blinkers and all that. I'm trying to think of the new business out there, what else they rent.
Well, yeah, the signs that are used when road construction is happening, or there's an accident, or there's, you know, the digital lit up signs. Yeah, and I don't know where they would fit on this list either.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if it's the council's consensus, we could add equipment rental as a specific allowed use by conditional use permit, and we can flesh out that definition, what's included.
I think that would be good.
So so if they have a yard, it's equipment rental. So they have this huge, brand-new big building, and they also have, along with that, things parked in the back. So that's secondary use to the primary. What was that? We had that at the mini storage.
Accessory?
Yeah, accessory use to the,
Yeah, so the equipment rental would occur within a building, but there could be equipment stored, you know, a certain percentage of the yard could be for equipment storage. A lot of times when you have nice new equipment, you don't actually want to store it outside, right? We saw that with Viking and EcoFun.
yeah, the inside of their building is plumb full, and then the wood chippers and man lifts and things are parked in the back.
Right.
So that's fine. So if we leave non-conforming, but with the CUP, they're allowed to expand, does that address the issue of some of the letters we got adequately, or how do you feel about that?
Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, the two letters I referenced were more focused on storage and not including the CI light on the east side. I think some other users in the district were concerned with not becoming non-conforming. And I haven't done a survey of every use out there, but if I'm reading the council, and I do want to get consensus from the council so we can direct drafting, the truck terminal concept and just trailer storage is out, but equipment rental, you know, with some outdoor storage would be in, and we would draft a definition for that. So far, that's the direction I'm taking. I just want to get a read if I'm.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. And I think I can't speculate whether we're going to address all the concerns with that, but you know, you're going to, as this goes on to get to hearing, I think you're going to hear from some of those existing users.
This is Shelley, I had one question. We talked about changing the amount of storage from 50 to 30%. I have a problem with that because if somebody has 8 acres, it's different than if somebody has like 2 acres, you know, as far as, so I'm uncomfortable with the percentage thing because somebody who has more acreage would have more of an impact than somebody that has less. So I don't know where we came up with that. We're going from 50 to 30.
I would guess it came from the fact that we want more nice buildings and less junk parked around them.
Right, and then I can see, so on a 2-acre piece of property, you know, it's gonna be different than somebody who has 8 acres, and they're gonna have possibly 44 acres of it in, or 50% for 4 acres of it in storage. So do you understand what I'm saying? Because I'm trying to apply it practically to the businesses we have, you know, and it's difficult.
Well, the businesses we have that have a CUP can operate under their CUP. I mean, even if we put this in place, they're not affected, correct? It's
That is
new
correct.
businesses.
Yeah, once you have a CUP, you always have it as long as you operate under it within the conditions.
Right.
Even if it's sold.
Yep, it runs with the land.
Okay.
Interim uses don't, but
I think
conditional uses do.
the only caveat would be if they opened up the CUP because they were going to expand, then you have the opportunity, then they have to abide by the current ordinances. Isn't that correct?
Not necessarily. So the whatever is new would have to operate under the current ordinances. And it would be up to the council whether you want to retroactively apply that to existing. You have to be reasonable in your approach. And so if it's something they couldn't possibly comply with, you know, without tearing down something,
Right.
there'd be a balance there. So the opening up of the CUP is a fresh look, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything on the property has to come into conformance. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
So are you comfortable with that, Shelley, that this doesn't affect anybody who's already here?
Okay.
And that was one of our goals, like I think Janet listed earlier, when we started this, was to simplify it for the customer and for Elizabeth, and to start upgrading. When you say, Bill, take a look as you travel down Lake Drive in your mind. You come out of Lino and there's lots of beautiful big buildings, and then there's the man caves. And then we've got City View has a nice big thing, North Pine has a great big thing. Those are the kind of, in my mind, that's what we're looking for. Not more junkyards that got kicked out everywhere else.
And the balancing act, Mr. Mayor, is that some of those businesses are able to do the nice buildings and facilities because you've allowed them some outdoor storage. Those two go hand in hand, right? Because they wouldn't be locating those facilities there and spending the money on the offices and covered facilities unless they had a yard. And so the question, you know, that's before you, it's been put before you both in the memo, but also in the commentary letters, is do you want to stick with 30% in the CI light, or do you want to go to some other number as a percentage? And obviously, we're fine either way, we just need your direction.
So it only applies to CI light?
Yes, that's my understanding. Elizabeth, you're closer to it than I
And
am.
at this point, CI Light is the west side, correct?
CI light is the west side, and the proposal is for a 30% outdoor storage.
I don't think most of them would be able to comply.
Say that again?
Maybe some new businesses would be able to comply, but your existing businesses will have way more than 30%.
But they already have their CUPs that allow for that, correct?
Yes, there's CUPs.
Yes.
If they cover outdoor storage, then they would continue to exist under those CUPs.
So I'm still having a problem with the non-conforming. I mean, you might be able to talk me into it for the truck yards or whatever we're calling that, but I really don't want to create a burden for existing businesses that have been good actors and have been good community. And so maybe, you know, if you just say contractor yards and the ones I'm thinking of fit into that and we do the circle, then maybe that's, if you agree, I mean, that would be the way to.
Mr. Mayor and council, I would prefer from a, just a defensibility standpoint that the proximity limitation be closer to the quarter mile or half mile, because if you completely knock them out of the district, then you should grandfather them in a different way. Because it appears that you've set up a performance standard that no one can meet. So just for the kind of integrity of the performance standard, I would prefer that it either be quarter mile, half mile, something that would apply consistently throughout the district, or simply saying that you're phasing out the use, but if you existed on this date, you can continue as a legally conforming use. You know, those are two options, and I've seen both used. I think if we do a 2-mile radius, it basically says everybody who's in is in and everybody who's out is out. And I think the more rational approach is to just simply say whether they're illegal or non-conforming, but then to have a date on which everybody who existed by a certain date has a conditional use permit is considered legally conforming.
That does it for me.
Okay,
It addresses my concern if we're able to do that.
sure.
This is Shelley. I was not aware that we could do a grandfather type.
Yes, you can make, it's basically kind of a phase out of a use, and so the question would be if we could get some clear direction from the council on what use you want to phase out and on which side of the road, so which district.
Okay, so this is where I am concerned. I'm not worried, about Waldox. I'm not worried about Rybex. What I'm worried about is some of these areas that could be brought up by somebody from the Twin Cities that has come up before and put things in our community that we didn't want. And renaming it, relabeling it, whatever they're going to do, all of a sudden we're stuck with something that is heavy industrial or lots more truck traffic or whatever. For instance, in behind where the log cabin is, I can't remember the name
David's
of the place.
Hydrovac.
Huh?
It's David's
Dave's
Hydrovac.
Hydrovac. Dave's Hydrovac. There's going to be, there's lots of houses in there that were built in the 1940s. They could just be pushed into the basement and someone could get a nice, business put in there on Lake Drive. And I just don't want to see people who don't care about Columbus coming in and doing that. And I feel like it's been done before here, and I don't want it to happen again. So if we could grandfather it in so that people could have what they want, and I assume you could still have the additional saying, you can add on or whatever within reason with their business, and I would think that that would be the way to go.
Mr. Mayor and Council, we're talking about two alternatives. So one alternative is to clearly state that contractor shops, first of all, what use are we talking about that we wanted to limit? Is it contractors' yards?
Well, yes, I think that's the term we're using for the businesses that are the high-impact businesses. And we're not allowing them, right, on the light side.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if you go to the definitions in the proposed ordinance, there's contractor shop, contractor yard limited, and contractor yard.
Right.
So those are the three definitions we're kind of working with right now. And what I understood, Councilmember Hegland, is that you wanted to limit the last of those three, which is contractor yard.
Right. Yes. And that's, so on
Yep.
the west side, it's limited.
Correct.
It's, the yard without the limited is not allowed on the west side.
Right.
So we would allow it on the east side. And I think what I'm hearing Shelley say is she's not as concerned about the nonconformity as I am. And she, you don't want any more of those. Is that correct? you want to say, no, they can't be on the east side either.
Right?
So basically, that would create nonconformities. And you can mitigate that by saying they can expand, but they still are going to be legal nonconforming.
Right. Contractor yards on the date of, such and such date are going to be treated as legally conforming.
So once this is ratified, and it says in it, they're treated as legal conforming. Is that what I just heard you say?
Yes.
So then what's the problem?
That's okay with me, because that, and I don't know if that's okay with you. I'm a little confused about what you're asking for.
Right, and what we need as drafters is consensus from the council. Give us direction on if that's the solution, or if that's too restrictive, or it's not restrictive enough.
I don't think it's too restrictive. The goal was not to cause hardship to anybody who's already there.
Right.
We know that. They're there. You're not going to take down pine aggregate or Sumstone or the blacktop thing. We know that. But we don't want 6 more of them coming in there. We want big brick buildings that pay some decent taxes to the city and don't put 100 semis an hour racing up and down in addition to what's already there. Isn't that our goal?
Yeah, and I think what Bill is suggesting gets us there, and it's a clearer path than my circle.
And it really is doing what that circle intended to do.
Yep.
Elizabeth, do you have input for us? Is it sounding?
No, I think I think I understand where you're going. It's just a matter of being on the same page as what the definition means. Like I was asking, what is mobile mini? And we said it's storage. So whether that's legal nonconforming or whether we're adding storage, I'm not really sure, because we allow warehousing and storage facilities. As far as the trucking, I understood that part. It'll just be a matter when you start applying it, can you apply the definition uniformly across the board? So, but until you have uses or concepts before you, you don't know what you don't know and what's going to come in. So, I was trying to run through the ones that are in the wings, that are waiting, to apply. And I think at this point they will work. But we'll run through concept plans, when we first adopt the ordinance, because I don't know how else to do it, to make sure that what you intended is what's in the ordinance.
So Elizabeth, does this draft then prohibit any additional landscaping? Again, I don't know. I don't see anything here about landscaping. We have some things that are landscaping.
Yes. So, and that's why I said I wasn't quite sure, because you talk about the contractor's shop talks about, the building trades. Then you go to the list. And it's a use, not a business. And I was trying to figure out where your service businesses are. What do you consider City View Electric?
Well, I don't know. I consider that service for construction, maintenance.
Contractor shop.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like that fits that definition, but I don't think landscaping.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, landscaping is listed under a contractor shop. Services such as landscaping, roofing, painting, and general construction. So my read would be that a landscape business would be allowed, I believe, on the east side, right? Because is a contractor shop allowed? And let me just take a look.
Contractor shop with accessory limited contractor yard.
Yep, so contractor shop, contractor yard limited would be allowed on both sides of Lake Drive. the way it's drafted. Along with some performance standards, which we're going to add. So this is going to sound repetitive, but I just want to get your direction as clear as we can. We're not going to add a definition for truck terminal or trucking businesses. We're not going to add any definition for outdoor storage of trailers or similar storage centers. Those uses, if they exist, they will become non-conforming with the ability to expand under a conditional use permit. We are going to clarify that any contractor yard that exists as the data or the ordinance is legally conforming. And we're going to leave the contractor yard limited at 30% outdoor storage.
Agreed.
I think the last question is, you have two different zoning districts here. Where's the boundaries?
We heard from one council member that it's an east-west across Lake Drive. That's probably the simplest and the cleanest. Is the rest of the council on board with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I was trying to figure out why they drew part of it over on the east side. Is it because those 8 houses right down that are on the border of 135th? There's just a few, I didn't see any other houses, residents that were on the east side behind any of those businesses.
Yeah, there's nothing behind them because it's swamp or wetlands.
So in that fact, what is it affecting? If there's nothing back there, I think kind of the thought of this was to what's affecting the residential if you're not affecting the deer.
Right, so that's why I was suggesting we don't do light on the east side. We keep the east side as CI, as it is now, and we do light on the west side, instead of having that boundary go through on 141st, and things south of that were light.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, because I think just the few houses that are already there, they have existing businesses there. So I don't think there would be any changes unless one of those businesses moved out and changed something.
And the difference on that side is that they are non-conforming. I mean, those residences are non-conforming.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Okay. I
That's
didn't know that.
different than on the west side where you've got a residential zone that they are legally conforming in, and we're trying to make things compatible with that.
Well, that brings up another question then. If they're non-conforming, is that considered commercial? Where
No,
those
so
houses are?
that was the question that I posed earlier, is that I think we want to limit expansion to non-residential uses,
Yes.
so that you don't create more residences in a
Okay.
commercial district.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, one thing that if we're done with that topic, I read through everything and I didn't see anything that had any standards on noise. So are the noise standards covered under the other part of the ordinance, the noise or the nuisance ordinance?
That's my understanding, but I can confirm with the drafters, so.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the only other thing I would add is we still have permitted uses, new permitted uses in the CI light, and I would just not have those permitted uses on either side. Offices with no outdoor storage, office showroom, and with no outdoor storage. It's just like, I just don't want permitted uses, but that's me. We have permitted uses that have always been there in the CI district, so, they're fine. Municipal buildings, accessory structures for single-family detached, blah, blah, all that kind of public buildings, that's fine. But I just like everything coming in and being reviewed for all the reasons that Shelley says.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so your city attorneys are going to sound like broken records at this point, but we'll just state the reason. The reason is virtually every ordinance in the metropolitan area, probably in the state, lists out permitted uses allowed as a matter of right to create a hierarchy of those things that you want and you want to attract. And those things that you don't think come with, and this is the but, those things that don't come with the kind of nuisance characteristics that you're trying to control through a conditional use permit. If you believe that you cannot, guarantee yourself that an office without storage, I mean, when you think about an office without storage by its terms, has really very few nuisance characteristics, right? I mean, we're talking about automobiles pulling up to an office, day workers primarily coming to an office. But if you think that you, for whatever reason, want to, as has been expressed, review those under a conditional use permit, by all means, you have the legal authority to do that. You will be an outlier. I mean, just understand that. And
We embrace being an outlier.
I understand. I want to make sure everybody understands the rationale that, virtually every other city follows, and you can be an outlier if you want.
I mean, I come from it by our experience with horticultural services who claim they were an office, and they were a landscaping business with a parking lot full of trucks and trailers that left every day and went to their sites and then came back. But in their mind, they were an office. And that's, without having had that review, I think that's why, that's where I'm coming from. It's like what we call an office and what somebody else calls an office can be very miles apart.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, if we get 3 or more of you nodding your head, then we won't bring it up again. So it's just, we have to give you the rationale for the hierarchy of uses, and you can follow it or not.
And I think Megan had mentioned that at her last meeting, whichever one it was, that from the other side of her business, some people just say, go out and find me a place that I don't need to get a conditional use permit. And then she scours the Midwest looking for something. But, so that's understandable. However, haven't we always had conditional use permits on Lake Drive?
Historically, Lake Drive has always, the requirements that you see here without H through K has been, since I've been here, I mean, for 20-something years, that's the way it's been.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. That's something that we noted when we were hired, so many years ago that, oh, this is a district of all conditional uses. And, I think by and large, because of the type of uses that were allowed in an unsewered district, that conditional use permit process gave you that additional comfort that you could require screening. Our ordinances were much simpler then, right? And so they didn't have a lot of performance standards. Those performance standards were adopted under a conditional use permit. So I absolutely understand the thinking and the logic and the long history. The stand that we made was more in the freeway district because, we've been hired by national companies, and I said this, 3-4 years ago, to go throughout the Twin Cities area and identify sites that would be prime for a data center or this thing or that thing or, something that you might like to have. And, oh, by the way, if there's any discretionary process, meaning a conditional use permit, we don't want to go there. We want to be able to, we want to build in 90 days. We're hot to go, and so tell us where we can do that without a lot of zoning process. And so those uses would be, and I said this, I think 3 or 4 years ago when it came up in the freeway district, those uses would just go to the next community, down 35 or in some other direction. And that, that is less of a concern on Lake Drive because it's an unsewered district. It doesn't have the same level of freeway access as the various zoning districts in the freeway. So if there's any place where having a conditional use permit process makes sense, it's probably Lake Drive for those reasons historically. So I'm truly less concerned about it on Lake Drive than I was in the freeway district. And, I lost that round too, so.
And Elizabeth, has it worked well enough?
Lake Drive, as Bill said, Lake Drive was always your district that allowed outdoor storage, and that was the segue of why we had conditional use permit. And most businesses knew that we allowed outdoor storage, and so they knew they couldn't go anywhere else and have outdoor storage without a conditional use permit. So it was always, for us, it wasn't, and on Lake Drive, generally, it was not an issue because they figured they had to go through a process.
Well, I would be in favor of keeping it then. I'll be the second nod.
So you're agreeing with me? Is that what you're saying?
I am agreeing with you.
Okay.
Anybody
There's two
else?
nods.
Yes.
Counting the nods.
Three
Three
nods.
nods.
I don't even know what I'm voting for anymore. Is it what you stated before?
Yeah, right, it's this idea that there's a hierarchy of permitted uses, conditional uses, accessory uses, interim uses, and, you know, when you start at the top, these are your most desirable uses, and so you let them come in on a site plan and a building permit. There's no discretionary CUP that goes with that. As I said, I think it's more important in the freeway district,
Right.
if you ever revisit that question there, but that's the question that's in front of you. Do you want to continue the historical requirement that most uses on Lake Drive are approved by conditional use permit? That's the question.
I defer to Janet, what Janet wanted.
I think we do want to keep it.
Yeah.
So would we just move H through K down to make,
Conditional use.
you know what I mean, and just incorporate them?
Yep. And then on the CI light, it would be H and I.
Let me just get there so I can make those notes. H through K, so the ones that are underscored, okay.
Can I ask one other question? Do we really want pawn shops?
You want what?
Pawn shops as an interim use? I'm not wild about that one.
I don't care.
I don't care.
We did that for,
They're quiet.
the pawn shop we did for.
I don't remember the reason though. Do we have one on Lake Drive?
It says, commercial, industrial, interim uses, pawn shop and secondhand dealers. Was that always in there? And I just didn't know it?
It has always been in there, yes,
Okay.
And
because otherwise it's retail use.
the secondhand dealer concept is something that really gained,
Like the consignment shops and
Yeah.
thrift shops and stuff, yeah. Yeah, those don't bother me. It's the stigma of a pawn shop is a little bit, you know, usually bars on the window and,
But if they build a nice big brick building, that's what we're trying to.
if it's always been there, it's fine. I
Well, I have a question on automotive, mobile home, travel, trailer, farm implement, and construction machinery. It lists mobile homes. Is that a good use for that district?
you should have some place that allows for, and I think mobile home is kind of the outdated term, it should really be manufactured homes. Manufactured homes are viewed as a opportunity for low-cost housing, and most of them are constructed today to a pretty high standard, as opposed to what we're probably thinking of as historical.
Well, that's all good, but do we want that? So he takes 10 acres and drags in 6 mobile homes, or pre-manufactured, or whatever you want to call them. And you put a phone booth for a sales office. Is that a good use of our limited land up and down Lake Drive?
So Bill, is it allowing manufactured homes as a residence, or this is the selling of them?
This is for sales, right?
So is that viewed the same way as what you were saying, where it's, you know, it's kind of affordable housing?
Ms. Mayor and Council, the only reference, if you look at, these are all things that are similar, right? And so if you strike mobile home, that's fine, or manufactured homes, that's fine as a legislative decision. But then if someone wants to come to your community and open up a showroom for manufactured homes, and I've seen some fairly nice showrooms that go with those facilities, it'd be like Coates. It'd be like saying, you know, Coates Trailer wouldn't be allowed in that district. So that's fine, that's your judgment, but that's what you're screening out, is a showroom for manufactured homes.
But again,
And how is that different from these other uses? You have to ask yourself if you're going to make a distinction.
I think the other uses already exist, and that was somewhat why we were okay with them.
what?
They already existed. The other things in this list already existed, but we don't have a manufactured home. So I think that's where you're coming from, right? Like, why would we add that?
Well, we're trying to build the future of that street for the next 50 years. Is that something you want? I mean,
Yeah, he was just asking why we would allow the rest of them, and I'm saying it's because they already existed.
correct?
But the manufactured home, mobile homes, doesn't exist. So
Yeah, I don't
taking
have
that
any
out-
problem striking it, but I just want to say there's a grouping of things that are consistent and like uses. And if the reason those uses are there is because they're already there, then that's a fine distinction. Every edit you make should have a rationale, that's all. So we can strike that. Is that the consensus of the council?
I'm okay with it.
Anybody have any problems with striking it?
And I did note that we were okay with the pawn shop.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to not strike that.
What about the manufacturing heavy, item P, is in Paul?
What number? Where?
P is in Paul, manufacturing heavy, that's above the mobile home art, I think.
Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that some of those things already exist on Lake Drive, right? If you look at the definition of manufacturing heavy, assembling, processing, research, development, or similar uses involving raw materials, and so on. That was my understanding, that those uses do exist or could exist on Lake Drive, but that would be only on the east side. So manufacturing light would be allowed on the west side.
What's the definition of heavy?
He just read it.
No, I thought we were going to grandfather in, is that right?
Contractors' yards. But we didn't ever talk about grandfathering. Manufacturing heavy, since the ordinance was first drafted, was always going to be allowed on the east. And manufacturing light, which doesn't process raw materials, would be allowed on the west. So you want to just look at those two definitions.
It's right here.
So we're trying to make them, the people that already have it, conforming. But are we going to allow then, in the future,
Yeah.
manufacturing heavy on the east side?
So far, that's been the direction.
So is this Simstone?
Yes.
Okay. I had,
No.
I had to correlate with something, because I was trying to figure out, like, what,
There's more than Semstone, isn't it?
for
For heavy
manufacturing?
manufacturing?
Who else does processing?
Yeah, who else does processing down there?
I don't know, I
raw
thought
material.
Pine Aggregate would be considered, or, I don't exactly understand Ryback, but I assume,
You know, I consider those contractor shops.
Well, they have elements of both,
Yep.
but again, in an industrial district, manufacturing would typically be allowed. Otherwise, and those types of facilities are big investments. I mean, it's not a small investment to build a new manufacturing facility today. So if you don't, it would be surprising to me if you don't want manufacturing in your commercial industrial district, but, you
I
tell
don't
us.
mind manufacturing, I don't want the pollutants that were included with Semstone and the asphalt company.
Right, and I believe the asphalt is under a separate definition. Asphalt and concrete are under a separate definition, and what you've got is what you're going to get. In other words, you have not allowed for those uses to continue. So I probably misstated Semstone as a manufacturing facility because it's really concrete processing, right? What was intended by the manufacturing heavy was the type of things that you would typically see in a manufacturing district. Heavy is intended to process raw materials, Light is not to process raw materials, but to put things together.
Elizabeth, didn't you say Semstone is already non-conforming? I thought you said that to us earlier, at an earlier meeting.
Semstone came in under contractor shop for under the old, you know what I mean, under their conditional use permit. And and then I thought we changed it, but I'm not seeing, you know what I mean, cement manufacturing in here anywhere.
No, it wouldn't be, my understanding is when the bituminous plant was approved, bituminous roadways, there was a specific definition for that facility. It was concrete and bituminous, and it applied to both, and there was only 2 locations in the city that was allowed. The Semstone facility and the bituminous roadways facilities. So my reading of this is that's not an allowed use on Lake Drive, and by extension, it's also not an allowed use in the Freeway District,
Because it's not listed.
because it's not listed.
Okay.
And
So
so-
what would be an allowed, so I'm having a hard time then understanding what fits under, like, give me an example of a business that actually would be manufacturing heavy.
So the primary distinction is the light, I'll define it by what it isn't. The light is intended to be processing things that are not raw materials. So think about assembling electronics.
Yep, I get the light.
Right, so I'm telling you by contrast.
Yep.
So the contrast for manufacturing heavy is that you actually could take raw material. A fiberglass plant, for instance, could bring in raw material and they could do an Arctic cover, or they could do a basketball backboard as a fiberglass product, because they're starting from raw material rather than other components. So that's
Then-
the primary distinction.
Or like,
It could be a chemical company. It could be a lot of different things that could possibly impact the community.
precast concrete.
I'm sorry?
Precast concrete would be involved in that, right?
I believe it could be if it's not, not processing asphalt, so, because the intention was not to allow for a second asphalt plant or, you know, concrete plant. So, yeah, if you could process panels from raw material, you could process, you know, aggregated lumber, you know, lumber panels, that sort of thing.
So I guess my question is, we added that in the CI district, and then it's only light in the CI light district. So my question is, do we want to add that in our CI district? You're saying it's typical in a CI district, but
It is, I mean, you know, in your community, if your public services support a range of uses, you want to have a range of uses in your community for diversity of tax base, for employment opportunities. But you may say that because we don't have sewer and water in that district, that heavy manufacturing is not really going to come there anyway, right? So you could eliminate it altogether. Or you could take the definition of manufacturing light and apply it to both sides. Because I would think that you would want electronic assembly, similar uses that are kind of clean uses.
so I would be in favor of light on both sides and take the heavy out.
I don't
Of
have a problem
CI.
with light. I'm questioning the heavy, and I'd like to get, I don't think that there's a place for that.
So I agree with you.
I think we can tweak the light to make it fit some of the people that might want to come in that are not going to cause a huge impact on the community as far as, I mean, we already know that we're exposed to the silica and that, you know, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has, you know, basically said, you know, you can have so much in the air, and I'm having a hard time with that when you have heavy manufacturing, because you're opening yourself up. And this is the type of thing I'm talking about when I say that there are people in the Twin Cities who are looking to put this type of thing in this area. We're a fringe community, so we're on the outside of the Metropolitan Council area. We are the people that are, people are pushing out. And Anoka County's already, you know, warned us that the type of businesses that are coming to the east corner of the cities is mostly heavy industrial. I mean, that's what they told us just last year. So I just don't want to become the repository for those types of businesses. And I can't believe that there aren't other businesses that we can attract, such as, you know, assembly or something that is going to have less impact on the community.
So I've made a note that I think there's consensus here, but you can all nod, so I can head count. I've made a note that the light manufacturing, we'll continue to call it light manufacturing, so it's clear that it's not the heavy manufacturing, but that it would apply to both sides. Because as it's drafted, it applies to the west side, and with the heavy on the east. Okay.
Yeah, the heavy wouldn't be on either side. Right now, it's just on the east side.
Heavy on the east side?
No,
So are we
taking
striking?
it out. It's only on the east side now, and I'm taking it out. We're taking it out.
So are we striking heavy?
Heavy will
Yes.
be struck.
Altogether.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Council, can I get a clarification, because I just didn't catch up with my notes? You wanted to move most of the permitted uses to conditional uses. I got the existing CI district uses, but under section 7A 746, I didn't get which of the permitted uses would still remain under CI light. So if you could help me with that, so my notes are.
A through G
Yep.
is going to stay, and then H through J is taken out.
Okay, and that's on the CI, right?
Yep.
So then.
So it's CI, you take on H and I. Mine only goes to I on the CI district, and on the light, it goes, I think, through J, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Thank
So-
you.
So, yeah, do you just revert back to what was the old list of permitted uses?
Right, we didn't have a CI light, so
Yeah.
they're all listed as permitted. So I'm just going to, under 7A 746, the permitted uses are A through G, right?
Correct.
And then H and I is what I've got as,
Conditional.
yep,
Yep.
okay, thank you. All right.
And I think the only other thing, I know that at one point, Megan added mortuaries without crematorium. I think she might have added that in one place, but not on the light side. It doesn't have that distinction. So I would say, I think I saw it on the CI side, but I didn't see it on the CI light side.
Meaning the council's okay with it as long as it doesn't have a crematorium?
Yep, so she added it under the CI and L. It says moratorium without crematorium.
Right,
Moratorium, no, mortuaries without crematorium. But on the light, she just left it as
got it.
mortuaries, and I would just say add the without crematorium.
And that's consensus?
Yep.
Okay. Got that, thank you.
So Elizabeth, are there any other, like when you look at the map, are there any other uses that you see here that we are leaving high and dry without intending to? Like, can you fit those into the existing definitions?
I'm wondering where, if you remember, we had a presentation, it was in the Freeway District, where they were going to do 8 to 10,000 square foot smaller buildings,
The Beagle guy?
right? And there's
Beagle.
a similar concept for Lake Drive.
thought those were contractor shops.
So, and so would you consider that F, you know what I mean? And then they would be allowed to have 30% outdoor storage if it was finished product?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I can't think of anything else on the east side, except for the trailer repair.
Is the trailer repair outside or inside?
It would be Mastel Brothers, they have all the storage of outside trailers. They have the trailers outside, and then they do the repair in the building. But here it just said church, it said vehicle service repair business. And there was nothing that talked about repair, you know what I mean? Tractor trailer, you know what I mean, repair.
Right, and the direction I picked up on earlier was that it was going to be non-conforming. If I've got that wrong, I wrote trailer repair and storage non-conforming. So was I reading that right, or do you want to create an exception?
Well, I think when we were saying trailer storage, it was taking into account the two trucking businesses that we have. That's kind of what they do. I mean, they kind of store their trailers and they drive them out, right?
That was on the east side, now,
Right.
you know what I mean, but the west side on the commercial light, that would be non-conforming then.
But that's not the same business that Mastel Brothers, or is it? I thought you
Yep,
said they
Mastel
do
Brothers is on
repair.
Mastel Brothers is on the west side.
No, I know that, but don't they do repair? There isn't, I know they store them to repair them, right?
Yep, it's trailer, it's storage and repair, service.
So the question is, do we want more of them or not?
I don't see any different than what's up on the freeway with RVs out there. That's more.
Can't hear.
I said I don't see it any different than the RVs sitting along the freeway, and that's right in our,
Well, except that it's on Lake Drive. You
No,
know,
I get it.
Shelley's concern
Well-
is bringing in more truck traffic.
right. But I guess some comparative, right? What's the difference? We're allowing it in the showroom of our community, why not allow it on Lake Drive?
So Bill, are you doing the carve out? We're doing the carve out where we're saying existing businesses are permitted and we're eliminating the expansion of non-conforming clause?
Mr. Mayor and Council, the direction was specifically on contractors' yards.
Yeah.
So the other uses would not be, they would be allowed if they have a CUP. They could expand as a non-conforming business with a CUP, but I was trying to limit the amount of businesses that we put in this category of grandfathered as of the date of the ordinance. So, meaning legally conforming. We're going to specifically say that contractors' yards that exist on the date of the ordinance are legally conforming. But that was the only use that I got that direction on.
So Elizabeth, when you read the definition of contractor yard limited, it does include trailers, maybe not the trailers you're thinking about, but providing general contracting, building site maintenance, or building construction services, including but not limited to fleet vehicles, trailers, machinery, seasonal equipment, and limited storage. Wouldn't that cover them?
You would start with, were you reading contractor yard limited?
Yep.
Yeah, so you would start with an establishment providing general contracting, building site maintenance, or building construction services. So that's the principal use, which also has these accessory uses, fleet vehicles, trailers, machinery, seasonal equipment. So those uses are related, that storage use is related to the first part of the sentence, which is the principal use. Does that make sense? So the two have to go together. You wouldn't have a freestanding storage of fleet vehicles, trailers, or machinery. They'd have to be part of something else, part of a business.
I guess what I'm not sure of are the truck trailers that he's repairing, are they used for construction? Or maintenance or cleaning or repair?
But the use of his building is repair and service.
So we've got a definition of machinery and equipment repair, the repair, servicing, maintenance, and reconstruction of machinery and equipment typically utilized by manufacturing and industrial establishments, including tool repair services, machine shops, welding shops, and other repair services similar in nature to those above. I don't know if that, to me, that's maybe a little closer than calling it a contractor's yard. Do we know that they do repair?
They do repair, yeah.
Right. So to me, that seems to fit in there. Now, is that use on the west side? I don't know that it is.
What did you just read from the definition?
It's on the same page as the contractor yard limited, and
Oh, I see, yep.
it's at the bottom.
They're heavy, got it, yep.
Yep. I'm guessing, though, that it's not on the west side. I have to go.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Wait. No, that's in the CI district. Wait.
I just saw the word heavy, and I assumed it wasn't probably on the,
Machinery and equipment. Nope, I don't see it on the CI light.
so that type of use could be established on the east, but not on the west. The uses that are there would continue as non-conforming.
Elizabeth, didn't you say that there was also an expansion of different services going on in that place too? I mean,
They wanted to rent the building to another vendor, doing the same exact thing, but they wanted to share the building.
so the question is, do we leave them out of the light side or do we add that back in? Or do we, I shouldn't say add it back in.
And if you add it back in, then it can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think if your intent is to create that distinction, east and west, you would allow it on the east and not on the west, and the additional CUP would still allow Mestel to continue. Because then if you start to move heavy uses to the west, then you'll start to blur the distinction of the two districts.
But were you gonna include it in the same way that you were including the contractor yard as a?
Legally conforming on the date hereof.
Yeah.
We can, I don't want to pockmark the, there's only so many,
Well, that would get us up to 2, right?
that would get you to 2. Yeah, and you want to keep it fairly clean.
I mean, he's not creating nuisances. Is he creating nuisances for the residential properties behind?
He owns the property behind him, so.
Big piece of property?
Mhm.
So then I would say, let him be number 2.
Council, is that what you want to do?
He's looking for nods. Or shakes of heads.
So just to frame that, then, the distinction we're drawing is, so an existing machinery and equipment repair heavy that exists today with a CUP, if it's not listed, then it would be allowed to continue as a non-conforming use and expand under a CUP. So that's one alternative. The other is to do what we talked about doing for contractors' yards, and specifically say that if you existed on the date of the ordinance, you are legally conforming with the ordinance. That means no one can be added, but you're not going to be given that treatment as non-conforming. So, and my, my resistance is only because if we start to do that everywhere, then we've kind of, again, blurred a distinction between conforming and non-conforming. And non-conforming are those things you want to phase out. So it's your call. I'm happy to write it the way.
So you're suggesting that it should be written that they do not become non-conforming, correct?
Correct. That they're treated as legally conforming, so they can
Yep.
say to their bankers and their lawyers, we're legally conforming because of this language in the ordinance. My only resistance, if you start doing that up and down the road, now you've kind of undermined you're creating this system of things that are allowed and things that are not allowed.
But you also said that we get to the point where there's too much of something, and I think we're at that point. I think we have been for a while. And so what I'm saying is that, I prefer the second way, where you're saying that, you're going to keep them
Okay.
so they can talk to their lawyers and their bankers,
Yep.
and get what they need to do. But, that was the whole purpose of this whole exercise, was to try and, slow down our contribution to the trucking and the heavy industrial or the pollution or whatever on Lake Drive, and make Columbus what the people in Columbus want, which is, we want peace, we don't want everybody running through Columbus to get to somewhere, with their trucks. And so I've always felt, having been in the asphalt argument, I always felt like, okay, this happened, I understand it happened, I'm willing to live with it, but no more. And I think that's where we're at.
So I got 2,
Yeah,
3.
Yep,
fine.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
Because our goal is not to shut anyone down or damage their business or make it more difficult. The goal is, like Shelley said, is to stop Columbus from being the dumpster for the metro.
Right, and you're proactively with a couple of these businesses, giving them what they might ask you to do, going forward. So you're being proactive in understanding that they have to meet certain objectives for financing and legal compliance.
Well, if it doesn't affect them, there should be not much discussion.
Right, because you're proactively giving them what they might ask for
Yep.
at a time when they would refinance.
Which is also our intention. Everything that's here is fine, but we don't want 20 more in the next 10 years. Am I correct?
So far, I'm agreeing with what Bill is saying. I'm not sure what you're just saying, but it's okay. If you're saying what he's saying, just in a different way, then we're cool.
Just not as eloquently, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think we've got really good direction from you tonight, and I think we can draft, catch 90% of what was discussed, or hopefully 100% of what was discussed. I'm sure I missed something, but
So do we call for, are we far enough along that we can call for a public hearing, or do you have to bring it back one more time?
Mr. Mayor, if you're comfortable that we've recapped, and we've tried to do it a couple times tonight, I'm comfortable that between Megan and myself, we can get this in a shape that can be published for hearing, and keep in mind that that doesn't prevent you from making further tweaks. It's just saying that the ordinance is in a state where we're ready to release it to the public for comment.
Well, I'm thinking if we want to try to hit that date, we better call for it tonight, right?
So your 2 choices, because it has to be a 10-day notice and it has to get to the newspaper. So your 2 choices are December 21st or January 4th.
And we wanted to try to do this by the end of the calendar year. So if you can get it done by then, I would say let's go with the December 21st.
Council?
Yep, I
Yes.
agree.
Okay.
But Bill, can your staff get it to us as soon as possible, so you don't drop it on us that morning of the meeting?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
the more
If you-
time we have to, if there's something to look at or change.
That's almost a month from now, so I would hope we could do it, well, we have to do it before it's published, right? Because people should be able to then contact the city and get a copy.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
thank you.
So, Bill, that would allow ample time for the public to be to have time to look it over in those existing businesses.
Yes, that's the idea, is with publication, there's an ordinance available, they can comment on it, they can have their, lawyers look at it. That's the whole reason that we give that notice. So, yes. And then there'll be an open hearing. It's at the Planning Commission, though, right? Yep.
So that would be a December 8th publication.
Okay. So we need it cleaned up by the 8th to be heard on the 21st,
Yep. So do you want me to make the motion?
and then it would come back to council on the 28th. Is that right?
Yes.
I'd also like to make a request of, I guess, Elizabeth, of the businesses that are going to be considered this, non-conforming but accepted businesses. I mean, is there?
Legally conforming as a date.
Yeah, and
Option.
I'd like a list of those so I know, what we're talking about, because it's really hard to talk in a vacuum. And I felt like we had that until we actually got the listing of what the businesses were. The other thing is that just tonight, I got, information from Waldox and Mr. Rybeck, and if we could get information from them, I'm just encouraging people to contact before the meeting, because it's really hard to make decisions based on without all the people kind of weighing in. And I feel like tonight we handled the businesses as far as, protecting the businesses that are there, but I also want to make sure that we, don't make things too difficult for the people that are going forward with selling property,
So at the December, I can't, once it's published, it's published, but as an exercise at the Planning Commission, after the 2 hearings that we're going to do, we can take this list and we can take what I would call the new ordinance, and as staff members, we can tell you what we think they are.
That would be so helpful.
And then you can tell us whether we're in consensus, because that's the only way you're going to know what is in or out or not, or what you think it is and whether it fits. So
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Does that make sense to you, Shelley? You're looking like, what?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm thinking of the timing, trying to get this thing moved forward.
Well, that shouldn't hinder.
How are we
You
going to
didn't-
get back to her?
Well, you were saying do it after the planning commission, after the hearings in the next planning commission, right?
you know what I mean, to do it, to do it at a planning commission meeting. If we can certainly do it at December 4th meeting, but now you're getting, you're getting down the road,
Right.
We can do it at the workshop, but the workshop's on the 13th. And I don't know how far you want to get down the road to do it. I do know that we have 2 hearings on the 7th. So I'm not sure where you want to put it, but to me, without that exercise, you won't know which ones are going to fall into what category, or as a consensus now with the new ordinance where you think they're going to fall. Because
I want to know how many there are going to be so that we know how uncomfortable we're going to make Bill.
well, it's not, what I think is in one category, you might say, well, no, it's not in that category. So that's why I want to make sure we're on the same page with definitions, and what uses are on your list and where they fall.
So when are you suggesting we do that?
So we can do it at the Planning Commission on the 7th, we can do it at the workshop on the 13th. You just have to tell me which date that you want to do this, if we're going to publish on the December 8th,
Well, let's
and then
do it
have
on
the hearing on the
21st.
21st.
Well, let's do it on the 7th then, because that's still before the 8th.
I think the 7th.
Okay.
So do you want a motion? So I would move to approve the CI District proposed ordinance with the changes that we discussed, and call for a public hearing on December 21st, 2022 at 6:30 PM with a publication date of December 8th.
I'll second the motion. Any other questions or discussion?
This is just setting the public hearing for it.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, I.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor and Council, you got a lot accomplished in the last, there's a lot of direction, a lot of good direction. Thank you.
Thank you. On to number 15, mayor and city council members report. Shelley.
I have nothing.
I have nothing.
I have two things. One is a personnel committee recommendation. You got in your packet a report for appointing a planning commissioner. And we have Mr. Ramish here in the audience. The personnel committee interviewed him on the 15th. And I wrote a little summary of what his experiences are. He would be, if approved by the council, he would be filling the position vacated by Pam Woloski. And my understanding is he's immediately available to fill the vacancy. And that would be great because then he'd be able to be on the board with the existing commissioners. So his experience, he's recently moved to Columbus. He's living in Pinehurst Preserved. He is a retired St. Paul fireman. He's past commander of the Pine City American Legion. He's built 3 houses, had 2 years of study at the University of Minnesota. He has time on his hands and he wants to give back to the community. And he's also very excited about the idea of having training opportunities and wants to do those things, which that's great because we have some really good training that is available to planning commissioners. So recognizes the balance that we're trying to accomplish between growth and trying to maintain a nice, rural, peaceful community. So I am really happy that he came forward to volunteer for this position, and the Personnel Committee is recommending the appointment of Mr. Frank Ramish to the Columbus Planning Commission to fill the position vacated by Pam Woloski. We think his professional and leadership experience and the desire to serve the community will be a great asset. So that would be my motion.
And I say, if you still want to do it after listening to this discussion tonight, then you're in. There is. This is a big one.
Yep.
Yeah, they're not all like this.
They're not all like this.
So I will second the motion. Any other questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Nope, one question. So was that our only applicant, or was there more than
There
one
were,
applicant?
there were 2 applicants. The second applicant that we had scheduled to interview called the day of and had to reschedule, and so we will be rescheduling. We actually have a number of other people that have expressed interest. I don't know where they are in the application process, but we'll be setting up another round of interviews.
Okay, because we got 2 other openings on top of Pam's, correct?
3,
3.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
but not till January.
Okay,
So this one is open now,
Perfect.
so, yep.
okay, thank you.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, I.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
And then the second thing I just want to mention is that I attended the Lions Breakfast on Sunday, and it was delicious as usual, and actually fairly well attended. We were there at 9 o'clock, and soon after we got there, there was a line that went all the way out into the hallway, and so I don't know where their numbers are compared to their old numbers, but it looked like they were getting a good turnout, so there you go.
I have no report.
Do you want me to do my park board report now, too? Okay.
You do Park Board?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so then, in your additions, there is a park board report. It is on page A5, and it's in the same packet that the letters from the attorneys are in. So there are a couple of things. One is just an update on where the park board is at with the park master plan. They kicked off that project at their their meeting last week. They're going to be using the paragraph that's from our comprehensive plan, which I provided in my report, as sort of their guiding principles. They're interested, as a priority in figuring out how to identify and implement a fiscal planning process to continue the maintenance of the city park and for establishing a replacement schedule for park assets. They also will be looking at, and this is specifically called out in our comp plan, ways to connect up to existing trails and natural resources like Lamprey Pass and Carlos Avery. So it was really fun because they got very excited about talking about doing this, and Frank did a really nice job leading them through that. And when we meet in January, they will be looking at a more specific timeline, looking right now at probably 9 to 12 months, but they have authorized additional meetings in order for them to make the time to work on this and to do some field trips and things like that. So that has started. The second thing is going to require some action on your part. So one of the things that we talked about was, as you may remember, there was a park on Howard Lake Drive that was decommissioned. It was taken out of our comp plan, and it's kind of sitting there as vacant land right now. The park board asked Elizabeth when that land was dedicated, because after 30 years, then it's eligible to be sold. And she reported back that it has been 30 years, so we can go ahead and sell that. So the park board is asking for direction from the city council to explore the disposal of that Howard Lake property. I think there's 2 lots, isn't there 2 lots?
2 separate lots?
So it'd be a similar process that we followed with the Haggard Park. Hopefully not all the title stuff that you had to go through with that. Hopefully it's a little more straightforward with that, but basically they would do the research and then come back with a recommendation to the council. And if you're okay with that, we just need a motion. I'll just make the motion that you authorize them to explore that disposal and come back with a report.
How much acreage is that?
It's not that big.
I think it's like 3.
Yeah, it's definitely, between both parcels, it's probably under 3. I mean, it's not much, it's not more than that.
3.6.
Yeah.
3.6.
How do you have that so easily at your fingertips?
On Donex.
So that was my motion.
That was your motion. I'll second the motion. Any questions or discussion? We'll call the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, nay.
Jesse, aye.
And then the last thing was the field and park fee schedule. So Lori presented updated data on the reservations for the ball fields and the picnic shelter. A few months ago, I gave you some numbers that were through August, and now we have numbers through October, which will be the year, because no one's going to play ball now. So there were 348 reservations for the ball fields this year. There are 29 reservations for the picnic shelter. All but 6 of them were from Columbus residents, which we don't charge Columbus residents to reserve the park shelter. The total revenue generated by these reservations was $7,500. We reviewed the park fees, and we wanted to make sure that the fees were going to cover the increased costs that we learned about with the RVS contract and the Jimmy's Johnny's contract. So Lori went back and took a look at that, and if we increase our ball field reservation fee from $20 to $27 for 4 hours, and increase our tournament fee from $350, which is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday reservation, to $375, and then just leave the picnic shelter fee as it currently is, we should be able to break even on the increase that we're expecting from RVS and from Jimmy Johnny's. So what I'd be looking for is I'd move to recommend that you would accept the proposed 2023 fee schedule as I've just presented it, and as is written in my report. And I have those numbers provided for you.
Didn't we just increase it last year?
I don't think we did.
Not last year, but I want to say, you know what I mean? It was within
was
2
here.
years. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah, it went from 15 to 20, and now it would be 27.
I think we increased it the first year I was on council because I was doing the park board then, and then we haven't increased it since, so it's been 3 years.
And at that time, we were talking about whether we would be, whether people would use it, because
And the numbers, the reservations have been holding steady. And we also, Lori presented what the surrounding communities were charging, and we were right in line with the, we had a few that were a little less, and then we had a few that were more. Our ball fields are evidently very sought after because they're so well maintained, so.
Okay.
So my recommendation is to accept their proposed fee schedule, so we need a second.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion?
I was just curious if you know if that 350 or 75, does that fall into a standard for other cities?
Yep,
Okay.
she had that comparison too,
Okay.
and we can provide that for you if you're interested. There was only one reservation for tournaments, so.
Oh,
Usually just that fast pitch tournament, right?
I think it is fast pitch.
Yeah.
The girls.
Yep.
Any other questions?
okay, nope.
I'll call the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
And then the last thing is just a little FYI and request to Jim. I know. Saw that, the pedestrian bridge. Please make sure it doesn't fall into the ditch.
So we did some repairs on that last fall,
Okay,
and we thought that we had it fixed, and we hired a contractor to backfill that under there, and we had some massively torrential rains and ended up making some more repairs and adding some curbing stuff, because the water runs down the trail and then goes to that low point, which is the bridge. So I just haven't had a contractor to come back
okay,
to backfill it, but it's been that way since we made our repairs. It hasn't gotten anywhere, so we've been watching it.
okay. Well, my job was to bring it to your attention.
Yeah, that's funny. I was just walking on it, and I went under there to look at it, and my kids said, watch out for the trolls, Dad.
All right, so then that's the end of my report.
Yeah.
All right. Public Works, Jim.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Assistant City Administrator, Jessica. Hello? She's off. Public Communications Coordinator report.
No report for me, just a wish for a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank
You too.
Elizabeth, Administrator's report, pages 19 through 29.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I have three things on my report. First of which is the employee FSA program. A FSA program is a flexible spending account, and we have had a request from several employees to implement a program. We looked into it a year ago, and we just didn't have the staffing in order to look at it closely. So now we've had the benefit of looking at it. We did talk to our medical benefit group, which is the Public Employees and Insurance Program, and they worked with a company, although they work with a couple, but they worked with a company called Further, and indicated to me that they felt that that would be a good compatible company to work with. We contacted them, we got an estimate from them as to what services would be provided for this flexible spending accounts. For those who don't know what a flexible spending account is, it's a pre-tax benefit for medical benefits. It's the employee's money, they put it in an account. In this particular account, they get to choose the amount, but there is a limit federally that's set, and I believe this year it was $28.50, or that could be next year's, but there is a cap on it, and it is a use it, lose it type of program. So you do have to understand what you're going to spend for that account, knowing that, again, you lose the money at the end of the year. In this particular case, we contacted Further. They did an analysis on how many employees we had and the city, and they indicated to us that there was a one-time setup fee of $250, and then thereafter, it would be a $75 flat fee because they charge $4 an employee, and we just don't have enough employees to meet the flat fee, so that would be applied. Cheryl indicated to me that it looked like if everyone contributed $1,000 to that plan, there would be $12,000 wages that we would save about $918 on taxes. So it is a savings to the city because, again, it's on a pre-tax basis. And in this case, the monthly cost of the plan is $900. So we do have that setup fee for the initial first year. So there would be, after the first year, a savings of $18 if, in fact, the 12 employees only put $1,000. But again, I think most employees will participate, and they'll probably participate at a higher level, but we wanted to be conservative. In this case, it is a overall budget layout of $1,150. It would be a savings the first year of $918. There is a balance of budget layout, and in this case, I do believe the $232 that the budget currently, as it's presented and will be presented on December 14th, can absorb. So my recommendation is that we implement an FSA plan for our employees starting January 1st, using Further as our vendor, who will work directly with PEEP in order to reimburse medical and dental, and then if they have any other reimbursements that are eligible, my understanding is you get a debit card and you can do it on your own or upload receipts. Questions about the FSA account, or where you think it's a good thing?
So we're only doing the medical, we're not doing the child care?
We are not doing the child care at this point.
Okay.
On the back portion where it says service fees, you have the non-discrimination testing ongoing, $600. Is that per year? On the bottom.
What page are you on? Are you on my memo, or are you?
I'm on page 20, well, it says 22 and 24, so I don't know. On the bottom of the chart.
Yep, I'm just trying to look to see where your $600 is.
Administrative fees will apply for each non-discrimination tests.
That did not apply to us.
It doesn't? Okay.
They only told us that because we're only doing the FSA, we are not doing the HRA. So we're only implementing a flexible spending account. We are not implementing an HSA account. So the only fee that applied to us was the $250.
Of this whole chart?
It's the $250 and then the flat fee where it says $75, the monthly minimum. Because the $4 participant, we 4 times 12 doesn't equal, it's less
Okay,
than
so it's
$75.
$75 a month plus, okay,
Yep,
I got it.
Oh, is that how you get to the $1,150?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Adding those two together.
Okay.
And then the savings was the $918, which ultimately a $232 layout for the first year.
Okay.
They do bundle services, so the HSA and FSA plans are bundled, but we separated them. We're taking baby steps in implementing the program. Thanks, Bill.
I think it's a great idea.
So I'll make the motion to approve the FSA plan, working with the company Further to implement the plan for the 12 employees starting January 1st, 2023, at a cost of $1,150. Is there a second?
Second, Rob.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
The second item is auditing services for the City of Columbus fiscal year 2022 audit. During the audit presentation in October, Andy Herring indicated to us that Red Pen Companies would not be able to perform or continue to perform our auditing services due to loss in staffing. And for whatever reason, our team, he lost twice. So during 2020's audit, he also lost the team. So I don't know what's going on there, but Nevertheless, they indicated to us that they would not be able to provide services for 2022. I did ask him for a list of recommendations along with contact, numbers for that. He did give me a list of 3, and in addition, I contacted CLA, which is Clifton, Carson, and
Larson Allen.
Allen, yes, thank you. However, when I contacted them, I thought perhaps that they had different divisions and that they would be eligible to do our audit, and they quickly told me that because we hired them to do accounting services, that they were disqualified, and they would not be able to even give me a proposal on audited services, and not only for 2022, but I think for 3 years they can't do the audit. So I then asked them for who they thought, we could work with, and they gave me a couple of names. So I had a total of 5 firms that I could go out to, which I did, and some of them did not return calls, others returned calls, and I did receive 2 proposals. The 2 proposals were in your agenda packets. I did review them. Their qualifications were very similar. Their staffing numbers were a little bit different. One firm is a little bit larger than the other. One is located in Rochester, has a Minneapolis office. Again, MMKR is a little bit bigger firm and has a few more communities than the other. But as far as qualifications and doing auditing services, they both have the same qualifications. So I kind of looked further into the proposals, and Smith and Schaefer does Linwood and Hugo, and then they do a few, a few other cities, but MMKR did a lot more cities in the Twin Cities, and they also did White Bear Township. So we know a person in White Bear Township and asked them about their services, and they came highly recommended. And so after doing that and looking at the price, and because, like I said, the qualifications were pretty similar, timing of what they can do was similar, I felt it really came down to price, and MMKR was the outfit that had the lesser cost for the audit and didn't ask for a 3-year commitment. So my recommendation is that we contract MMKR for auditing services for fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $32,500, and that we would ask them to file the OSA form, which generally costs $400 or $500 at the end of the day.
So moved. Is there a second?
This Shelley, I'll second it.
Any other questions or discussion?
Well, I was just going to say I read through the whole packet, so I did want to at least give my comments. Because I read through and I went online and searched reviews, and I did see some reviews and made the same conclusion as you did.
I did too.
Yeah, I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
The last request is being Wednesday, we don't have a meeting on Wednesday because we're meeting tonight. I'm asking the council if we can close the offices at 4 o'clock versus 5 o'clock because we don't have a night meeting on Wednesday.
Why not 3?
All right.
Yeah.
I
That's
have
what time
no-
we close, but.
No problem with that. Is there a second?
This Shelley, I'll second it.
I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
So I gotta clarify, was that 3 or 4 then?
I thought it was 3.
I think I heard 4.
All right. So, anything else, Elizabeth?
I have nothing further.
Announcements and reminders. Tonight's meeting is nearly done. The Planning Commission is on the 7th of December at 6:30. Our next regular city council meeting is, oops,
And we have nothing next week, right? Because I looked at that calendar a few times.
yeah, it's,
That is true. That is the 5th week, and so there are no meetings that week. On December 7th, that is the public hearing for Blaine Brothers. And there's another public hearing, and I'm just drawing a blank on it, but there are 2 public hearings I'm thinking it's an ordinance that the other public hearing is on. And the 21st, there's a public hearing for a kennel. So there are applications for planning commission through December.
And our next council meeting is December 14th, not November 14th. And the calendar's on
Well,
the
the
back.
calendar was October.
Huh?
What does it say,
The
October?
calendar said October, but I just
And this said
didn't pay
November,
any
but it's really
attention to it.
December already.
Oh, it does. That's probably wishful thinking.
That's how fast time flies.
So that Blaine Brothers public hearing was the 7th of December?
Blaine Brothers, yes, it's
Is that,
December.
is that a 5:30 or 6:30?
That would be at 6:30.
6:30, okay.
I'll make the motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Can I return this to you?
Call the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good, safe Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.